I'm Beatrice, a 29-year-old graphic designer living in Austin, Texas, a city that hums with food trucks, live music, and the kind of energy that makes even a late night at work feel like part of a bigger rhythm. People who meet me now think I've always been immersed in this lively, colorful world. What they don't know is that not long ago, I was clawing my way out of a wreckage I never saw coming. The story begins with Grayson. Grayson had been my college sweetheart from our days at UT Austin. He was the kind of guy who could light up a room simply by walking in, a smile that convinced strangers they'd known him for years. He had charm, an easy laugh, an ambition that seemed to stretch as wide as the Texas sky. By the time he launched his career in real estate, I was sure we were building something solid. 3 years together, 3 years of late-night taco runs, weekend hikes in Barton Creek, lazy mornings tangled in bed with sunlight pouring through our cheap East Austin apartment blinds. I thought we were making memories that would one day become family stories. Looking back now, there were cracks, small ones I ignored. Grayson was restless, always chasing the next big deal, the next thrill. Sometimes I caught him staring at his phone too long, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. But I convinced myself every relationship had moments like that. The night that was supposed to be the highlight of our love story was staged in a downtown event space draped with string lights, filled with our friends and colleagues. There was a local band playing acoustic covers, a spread of brisket sliders and margaritas, and laughter echoing off exposed brick walls. I remember how warm my cheeks felt when I realized it wasn't just a party. It was our engagement party. Grayson stood at the center of it all, holding a microphone, looking every bit the man of my dreams. My heart hammered as he dropped to one knee. A diamond caught the light and threw sparks across the room. Everyone cheered. Tears blurred my vision as I said yes, my voice trembling but certain. For a fleeting moment, I thought my life had aligned perfectly. I floated through the celebration, the ring heavy on my finger in a way that felt both grounding and surreal. But as the night wore on, I felt suffocated by the noise, the congratulations, the endless snapshots capturing my supposed happiness. My phone had almost no signal inside, so I slipped out into the courtyard. It was quieter there. Fairy lights strung across a wrought iron fence glowed softly, and a fountain bubbled gently in the corner. I pressed my back against the cool stone wall and let out a shaky breath, staring up at the stars peeking between city lights. That's when I heard it. Low voices, urgent, too close. I turned, and what I saw ripped my world in half. My younger sister Chloe was tangled against Grayson, their lips locked, their bodies pressed together like they'd been waiting for this moment all night. For a second, my brain refused to process it. Chloe, my sister, the one with the glossy hair, the flawless Instagram feed, the kind of boldness I used to admire, was kissing the man who had just slipped a ring on my finger. And Grayson wasn't pulling away. His hands were in her hair, his body leaning into hers, like this was the truest thing he'd ever known. The courtyard tilted. My stomach dropped so violently I thought I might be sick. The sound of my own pulse roared in my ears. I froze, my breath caught somewhere between a gasp and a scream. Then Chloe's eyes opened. They locked on mine. For the briefest moment, her face flickered with guilt. But it wasn't pure shame. There was defiance there, a spark that whispered, I don't regret this. Grayson's eyes followed hers. He turned, his face flooding with panic, as though he had just been jolted awake from a dream. Beatrice, he stammered. But I couldn't hear it. I couldn't stay. My heels struck the pavement, sharp against the silence as I bolted back inside. I didn't even stop to think about the dozens of faces that turned when they saw me rushing past. I didn't explain to the friends who called after me. I just grabbed my purse, shoved open the venue doors, and ran until the city swallowed me. By the time I collapsed in my car, my hands were trembling so violently I could barely fit the key into the ignition. I drove aimlessly at first, tears clouding my vision, my throat raw with sobs I couldn't hold back. Eventually, I ended up downtown at a cheap hotel with a flickering neon sign. I paid for a room without remembering handing over my card, stumbled upstairs, and fell face first onto the bed, still in my party dress. I don't know how long I lay there before my phone buzzed. The first message was from Chloe. I'm so sorry, Beatrice. I didn't mean for you to find out this way. I love him. The second was from Grayson. I thought proposing would fix things. But the truth is, I'm in love with Chloe. We're meant to be. I stared at the screen until the words blurred. Each sentence felt like a blade twisting deeper. 3 years of love, of late-night tacos and whispered plans reduced to a placeholder role. I was nothing more than a stand-in until Grayson realized he wanted my sister. And Chloe, how could she do this to me? I cried until my body shook, until the pillowcase was soaked, until there was nothing left but silence. In that silence, a single thought gnawed at me. They didn't even try to hide it. They didn't think they needed to. That night, I understood that betrayal wasn't just about losing Grayson. It was about losing Chloe, about realizing that the family I trusted might not choose me when it mattered. I didn't know it then, but this was only the first fracture. The worst was still to come. 5 days in a downtown hotel with a humming ice machine and a view of a brick wall taught me 2 things. I could run out of tears and still feel hollow, and my savings could evaporate faster than I thought. On the 5th morning, I stared at the bathroom mirror, puffy eyes, mascara ghosts, the engagement ring balanced like a lie on the edge of the sink, and told myself I only needed an hour. In, out. Laptop, hard drives, clothes, sketchbooks. I'd answer client emails, pretend I'd just had the flu, and keep my life from collapsing in public. The drive back to East Austin felt like crawling into a mouth I knew would swallow me. The sun sat low and white-hot. Every red light felt longer than the last. When I pulled into my spot, my hands were sweaty on the wheel. I rehearsed a plan. Quick smile to any neighbor, no eye contact, key in, grab, leave. I told myself I was fine. I told myself I didn't care. The key slipped once against the lock, scratched the paint. The moment the door swung open, the plan died. My living room was full. Mom, Dad, my aunt, who had been staying with us since her husband passed, perched on the arm of the sofa like a small, satisfied bird. And there, a few steps behind them, Chloe and Grayson, shoulder to shoulder, as if they were a set someone had ordered online. No one screamed surprise, no one looked ashamed. They smiled like they belonged in my home. My mom moved first. "Oh, Beatrice," she breathed, arms opening as if she could pull me backward in time. I stood in the doorway, keys still pressed into my palm, something animal thrashing in my chest. "We were worried," Dad said, his voice warm and practiced, the same tone he used for church greeters and new neighbors. Grayson didn't meet my eyes. Chloe's were rimmed red, soft and glassy, like she'd been crying in a mirror until she found the angle that made her look most sympathetic. "What are you all doing here?" I asked, and even I could hear the rip in my voice. "We wanted to talk," Mom said, hands already reaching, already comforting herself with the illusion that I'd accept it. "You disappeared. We were afraid." Afraid of what? That I'd spoil their romance by existing? Before I could step back, Chloe closed the gap between us and flung her arms around me. Her perfume, honeysuckle and something sugary, coated the air. "I'm so sorry, Beatrice," she sobbed into my shoulder. "I didn't mean to hurt you." Her body trembled, but there was a purpose to it, a choreography perfected in front of a phone camera. I stood stiff as a fence post. "Don't," I said. The word came out thinner than I wanted. I peeled her off. "I'm here to get my things. That's it." Grayson decided then that he'd discovered calm. "You don't have to leave," he said, hands spread in a gesture he must have learned selling houses. "I'm moving out. I'm going to live with Chloe now." A sound left my throat that didn't feel human. Maybe a laugh. Maybe a warning. And then I saw it. The way my family looked at them. It was subtle, but it was there. Soft eyes, uplifted mouths, relief, approval. My aunt folded her hands like she'd just watched the last scene of a romance where fate finally got it right. Mom's gaze slid between Chloe and Grayson, glittering, like she was watching a story she could defend to anyone who asked. "What?" I said, the words shivering with heat. "Exactly are you all smiling about?" Mom blinked, as if I'd missed the cue. "We can't undo what happened," she said, gentle, reasonable, the voice of a woman who taught her daughters to share. "But Chloe and Grayson are in love. We have to accept that. It's for the best." "For the best," I repeated, as if I could crack the phrase open and find logic inside. Chloe sniffled, lifted her chin. "I wish I told you sooner," she said. "I didn't want you to find out like that. But we're soulmates, Bea." She glanced at Grayson with a tiny triumphant smile. Then, because the scene called for it, she rose on her toes and kissed him. Quick, careful, deliberate. A proof. A claim. My mom dabbed at the corner of her eye. My aunt hummed, approval disguised as empathy. My dad's mouth made a line I had learned to dread. Don't be childish, Beatrice, he said, the consonants clipped. Things happen. You should be happy for your sister. You can't make this all about you. Something in me went very, very still. She broke up my engagement, I said. He proposed to me and kissed her the same night. I looked at each of them in turn, searching for a crack. And you're standing in my living room telling me to be happy? You're jealous, my aunt added, as if she were diagnosing a stain. That's natural, but family sticks together. The room throbbed. The plants on the windowsill looked greener. The rug brighter, like my body had dialed the world's saturation to survival levels. This was the moment, I realized, the line between the life I thought I had and the truth. They weren't confused. They had chosen. A laugh slid out of me, sharp as a blade. Get out! They blinked. It didn't compute. Get, I said, each letter landing like a stone. Out. Of my house. Mom's voice went brittle. Sweetie, you don't mean... I do. I stepped around her, into the hallway, into my room. The door clicked behind me. Not a slam, just a decision. I pulled a duffel from the closet. Clothes, charger, laptop, external drives, sketchbooks, tablet, toiletries, passport. Fast, automatic, careful. I stood at my dresser and stared at the ring on my finger, its pretty lie throwing light against the mirror. I slid it off and dropped it into a ceramic dish shaped like a leaf. It made a sound like a coin. Their voices swelled and fell in the living room, the murmur of a family that believed it could talk anything into being. With every zip and fold, the air in my room got lighter. When I opened the door again, they turned toward me, like I'd missed my cue to apologize. I lifted the bag to my shoulder and walked to the entryway. Mom reached out quickly, fingers closing on my wrist. "Bea, don't do this," she pleaded. "We can figure it out, okay? You can stay. He'll move his things. We can make it work." I looked down at her hand on my skin. "Take your hand off me," I said quietly, "and leave." She let go. The look she gave me carried a lifetime of expectations I was no longer obligated to meet. "Where are you going to go?" Dad asked, as if concern could replace accountability. "Away from this," I said. Chloe stepped forward again, eyes shining. "I'm sorry," she whispered, and somehow I understood that she meant she was sorry I wouldn't accept the script where I played the saint who clapped at their wedding. I opened the door. Hot air rushed in from the hall. "Out," I said one last time. I didn't wait to see if they listened. I stepped into the corridor, the duffel thumping my hip, and I pulled the door closed. The latch caught with a clean, satisfying click. On the stairwell, my breath finally found a rhythm that didn't hurt. By the time I reached the parking lot, the sky had turned the color of a bruised peach. I tossed the bag in the back seat, slid in, and pressed my forehead to the steering wheel. For a heartbeat, I thought I might pass out. Then the car turned over, the engine a low, faithful hum, and I pulled out into the street. Relief and rage rode shotgun all the way down the block. I felt taller and hollow all at once, like a tree after lightning, still standing but different. They had chosen Chloe's happiness over my dignity, Grayson's want over my worth, and if they could normalize a betrayal this loud, what else would they excuse? I pictured the living room without me in it, Mom smoothing cushions for Chloe, Dad offering Grayson a beer, my aunt telling a story about how real love disrupts the best laid plans. This wasn't the last ambush, it was the opening act. I didn't know yet where I'd sleep that night or how I'd explain the gap in deliverables to a client who didn't care about my heart. But I knew this. Whatever came next, I would not stand in that room again and let them teach me how small I was allowed to be. At a red light, my phone buzzed with a message I didn't read. I stared at my reflection in the black screen, swollen eyes, set mouth, and chose my side. The night I left my apartment with that duffel bag, I didn't drive toward any destination. I drove toward absence. Streetlights blurred, Austin's skyline rising and falling in the rear view as if it, too, didn't know where to stand. By the time exhaustion forced me off the highway, I ended up in a short-term rental near South Congress, one of those units meant for touring musicians, with posters of old bands curling on the walls and a mattress that smelled faintly of smoke. It wasn't home, but it was empty of their faces. That was enough. The first weeks blurred into a collage of work deadlines, half-eaten takeout cartons, and silence that was too loud at night. My clients didn't know their designs had been drafted between tears, or that I muted Zoom calls to keep my voice from cracking. But I met every deadline, sometimes earlier than promised. If grief was going to hollow me out, then productivity would at least fill the space. I found a new apartment by the end of the month. South Austin, a fourth-floor walk-up with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the skyline. It was smaller than my old place, but drenched in light, the kind that made plants greedy and shadows soft. The first night I set a chair by the window and watched the city glow. It felt like defiance, proof that I could exist without them. Still, the silence pressed in. That's when Alma started showing up. I'd met Alma at a co-working space years earlier. She was a copywriter with a sharp tongue and a laugh that cracked like breaking glass. The kind of friend who could insult you and heal you in the same sentence. She didn't ask for explanations when she saw my packed boxes stacked by the window. She just raised an eyebrow and said, "Well, if you're running away, at least you're doing it with good lighting." Alma became my anchor. She dragged me out for coffee, even when I insisted I was too buried in client work. She signed us up for trivia nights, convinced me to join her at pop-up art shows, and shoved tacos in my hand when she saw me skipping meals. With her, I didn't have to pretend to be okay. She didn't demand explanations. She gave me space until I could pour the story out in jagged pieces. "I knew Grayson was an idiot," she muttered one night, stabbing her fork into a salad. "But your sister? That's next-level betrayal." I shrugged, staring at the condensation sliding down my glass. They didn't just betray me, they replaced me. Alma reached across the table and squeezed my wrist. "No one replaces you. Not really. They just downgraded without realizing it." Her words sat in me like medicine I didn't want to swallow but needed to. Then there was my cousin, Marcus. We'd grown up more like siblings than cousins, trading secrets during family barbecues while the adults played cards inside. When he found out what happened, his voice over the phone was thick with disbelief. "They let Chloe steal your fiancé, and then they sided with her?" He exhaled sharply. "Unbelievable. You don't need them, B. You've got me. Always." He called every few days, sometimes just to rant on my behalf, sometimes to send memes he knew would make me laugh. He didn't let me forget that family could mean choice, not obligation. Work became more than survival. It became escape. I landed bigger clients, branding gigs for local businesses trying to stand out in Austin's crowded scene. I picked up a side hustle designing merch for indie bands Alma knew, which gave me a new community that didn't care about Chloe or Grayson or what my parents thought. They cared that I delivered designs that sold at shows. Success crept in quietly, like vines curling over an abandoned fence, and yet, underneath the growth, there was a petty ember I nursed without shame. I kept my social media public. Every new client, every late-night mural shot, every brunch with Alma, I posted. I didn't do it for followers. I did it because I wanted my family to see me thriving without them. I wanted them to wonder if I missed them, and I wanted the answer to be obvious. One afternoon, a thick ivory envelope arrived. Chloe and Grayson's wedding invitation. Scripted fonts, embossed edges, the works. My fingers trembled as I tore it open. They wanted me there, not just to watch, but to validate, to pretend none of it mattered. I ripped it into strips, each tear a declaration. Alma tossed the pieces into her fireplace later that evening, flames curling greedily around the shreds. "Good riddance," she said, raising her wine glass. Marcus FaceTimed from his apartment, cheering as I held up the empty envelope. Some of our mutual friends skipped the wedding too, once they heard the story. Their absence was its own kind of vindication, proof that not everyone had bought into the lie of Chloe and Grayson's soulmate narrative. Months turned into a year. Seasons shifted. The skyline from my window became familiar, the hum of traffic below almost comforting. The weight of betrayal lessened, replaced by a sturdier sense of self. I was no longer the woman sobbing into a hotel pillow with mascara on her cheeks. I was someone who'd survived the storm and built a new roof over her head. But healing is never linear. Some nights, the silence clawed back in. I'd lie awake, the glow of the city outside my window, and wonder if I was missing something essential by cutting my family off completely. Then I'd remember the look on Mom's face, the softness in her eyes as she watched Chloe kiss Grayson, and the doubt hardened into resolve again. It wasn't just about Chloe and Grayson. It was about everyone else in that living room who chose to normalize my pain. So when my phone lit up with their numbers, birthdays, holidays, Just checking in. I let it ring. When their Facebook messages slipped into my inbox, I ignored them. And when they sent me a holiday card one December, I tucked it into the trash unopened. I wasn't interested in pretending. By the time my business was thriving and my days were filled with friends who treated me like more than a placeholder, I thought I'd buried that chapter for good. Until one morning the phone rang again. An unfamiliar number. I almost silenced it, but something in me hesitated, a chill that whispered answer. I pressed the screen to my ear. Beatrice? The voice cracked. It was my mother, shaky, desperate. Please don't hang up. The past I thought I'd buried was clawing its way back. Please don't hang up. Her voice was thin, frayed at the edges, the way it used to sound when she was sick and whispering from her bed. I froze in my chair, coffee cooling between my palms. The sunlight streaming through my South Austin windows felt suddenly harsh, exposing. Mom? My throat tightened around the word. Yes, she said quickly, relief spilling into the syllable. Oh, thank God, I didn't think you'd answer. I almost didn't. My thumb hovered over the red button, but curiosity, morbid, heavy, pinned me to the line. She inhaled shakily. It's about Chloe and Grayson. Of course it was. I stared at the steam fading from my coffee cup, my reflection rippling faintly on its surface. What about them? They're in trouble, she said, and the words tumbled like loose bricks. Serious trouble. The food truck, her breath hitched. It failed. Investors backed out. They borrowed. Too much. And now people are after them. Loan sharks. It's bad, Beatrice. It's very, very bad. I sat there silent, letting the words settle like ash. Loan sharks. Debt. Collapse. They're behind almost 100,000, she pressed on, desperation sharpening her voice. They've sold what they can. We've helped all we're able. So have Grayson's parents. They're out of options. And, she faltered, they're afraid. Afraid. The word should have tugged at something soft inside me. It didn't. Why are you telling me this? I asked slowly. Because you can help. The coffee cooled to sludge. I know you're doing well, she said. We see your posts, your business. You have savings, don't you? You could loan it to them, just until they can get back on their feet. Please. If they don't pay soon, I'm afraid for what might happen. I pushed back from the table, pacing across my apartment. My pulse throbbed in my temples. Why isn't Chloe asking me herself? Silence crackled. Then, they didn't want me to call you. They're too proud, too ashamed. But I can't just stand by. Her voice cracked. I'm begging you, Beatrice. You're her sister. Her sister. As if that bond was unbreakable, no matter how many times Chloe had cut it. Images clawed up, Grayson's lips pressed to Chloe's in the courtyard, my family's approving smiles, my mother dabbing at her eyes while my heart split in two. I laughed, bitter, jagged. You think I'm going to bail them out, after what they did to me? They made mistakes, she rushed. We all did. But this is life or death. You don't want her blood on your hands, do you? The manipulation was sharp enough to draw blood. I gripped the edge of the counter, nails biting into wood. You lost the right to ask me for anything the night you chose them over me, I said, voice low but steady. All of you did. Please, she whispered. If you don't help, she could... Her breath broke into sobs. I can't lose my daughter. You already did, I said, harsher than I intended. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. Then came her words, trembling with fury. Selfish! That's what you are. Chloe could die, and you'd just sit there clutching your money. How can you call yourself family? Family. The word stung like a curse. I don't owe them anything, I snapped. Not money, not forgiveness, not one more second of my life. Beatrice. I hung up. My hands shook as I dropped the phone onto the counter. My chest heaved with something between rage and relief. I slid down the cabinets until I was sitting on the floor, the cold tiles anchoring me as guilt gnawed at the edges of my resolve. She had begged. She had cried. And for a flicker of a second, I had felt that old pull, the desperate urge to make her proud, to win back her love. But then I remembered the living room. Their smiles, their words. Don't be childish. You should be happy for your sister. That memory doused the flicker like water over a flame. I stayed on the floor until the shaking subsided, until my breathing steadied, until the phone lay silent on the counter. I wasn't the villain here. I repeated it like a mantra. They had betrayed me. They had chosen Chloe. They had defended her. I wasn't selfish. I was surviving. But the weight of my choice still pressed against my chest, heavy and cold. For days, I carried it with me, like an unwelcome shadow. Every client meeting, every trivia night with Alma, every run to the grocery store, it followed. At night, it seeped into my dreams, twisting into scenes where Chloe cried out for help and I turned my back. Still, when my phone buzzed again with my mother's number, I let it ring. When she left voicemails thick with tears, I deleted them without listening. I told myself I had drawn the line. But deep down, I knew one thing with bone-deep certainty. Chloe and Grayson weren't finished with me. They never were. It was Mrs. Alvarez who warned me first. She lived 2 doors down, a widow in her 60s with sharp eyes and a habit of keeping watch over the complex from her balcony. One Thursday afternoon, while I was at the office polishing a client's logo draft, my phone lit up with her number. She never called unless it was important. "Beatrice," she said, her voice tight. "There's a couple outside your apartment. They've been yelling for you, pounding on the door. They don't look right." A cold pulse shot down my spine. What do they look like? She didn't need to finish before I knew. Tall man, dark hair, pacing like he's ready to fight. A woman, loud, insistent, pretty, but with anger spilling all over her face. Chloe and Grayson. Mrs. Alvarez sighed. "They've been at it for almost an hour. You want me to call the police?" "No," I said quickly. "I'll handle it." My voice sounded steadier than I felt. I grabbed my bag, bolted for the car, and drove home with my heart hammering, every red light a curse. By the time I pulled into the lot, the sun was sliding down, painting the sky in streaks of blood orange and violet. And there they were, exactly as she'd said. Chloe was slamming her fists against my door, her voice shrill enough to cut through the hum of traffic. Grayson stalked back and forth like a caged animal, jaw clenched, eyes darting. My neighbor's curtain twitched, then stilled. The whole complex seemed to be holding its breath. I climbed out of my car, clutching my phone like a weapon. "What the hell are you doing here?" I shouted across the lot. Chloe spun around. Her face was flushed, hair disheveled, eyes wild. For a moment, she looked nothing like the polished influencer I'd grown up resenting. She looked desperate. Grayson turned too, his gaze locking on me with a heat that was equal parts fury and pleading. "Beatrice," Chloe started, her voice pitched high but threaded with something softer. "We just want to talk." "I don't want to hear it." I held my phone higher. "Leave before I call the police." Grayson's eyes flickered, and in 2 strides he closed the distance. Before I could react, he slapped the phone from my hand. It hit the pavement with a sickening crack, skidding out of reach. My breath caught. Fear spiked, hot and paralyzing. "Don't," I whispered. "We're not here to hurt you," Grayson said, though his stance said otherwise. "We just need a conversation, that's all." Chloe stepped forward, her voice trembling but laced with anger. "Mom told me about your call, about how you're blocking everyone, acting like a victim. It's been years, Bea. You need to get over it. We're family." Family. That word again, stretched thin until it was meaningless. I shook my head. "You show up here uninvited, threaten me, and then tell me to get over it? You're insane." "We sold everything we had," Chloe pressed on, ignoring the edge in my voice. "Our house, jewelry. We've scraped together what we could, but it's not enough. We need to know that when things get worse, you'll help us. You're the only one left." I let out a laugh, bitter and sharp. "Help you? I hate you both. You think you can tear my life apart and then come crawling back for a handout?" Grayson's eyes narrowed, his voice dropping low, dangerous. "We're not leaving until you agree." My stomach flipped. Agree to what? Chloe pulled a folded piece of paper from her bag, thrust it toward me. "Sign this. It says you'll loan us money when we ask. Just a promise, Bea. Something to show the people we owe that help is coming." My hands curled into fists. "You're out of your minds. Even if I signed it, it wouldn't hold up in court. And even if it did, I'd never put my name on anything for you." Her face twisted. In one sudden motion, Chloe shoved me hard. My back slammed against the wall, the breath whooshing out of me. "You owe us," she hissed, eyes blazing. "We're family. You don't get to just walk away." Every instinct screamed to shove her back, to make her feel even a fraction of the pain she'd inflicted. But I held myself still, trembling with restraint. I would not give her the satisfaction. Instead, I lunged for my phone where it lay on the pavement. My fingers closed around it, and I bolted for my car. Thank God I'd left the engine running. Chloe shouted my name, her voice tearing through the air. Grayson lunged forward, but I slammed the door shut and hit the gas. Tires screeched against asphalt as I peeled out of the lot, adrenaline surging through my veins. A few blocks away, parked under the glow of a convenience store sign, I dialed 911 with shaking hands. My voice trembled as I told the operator everything: the shouting, the threats, the shove, the attempted break-in. By the time I circled back, police cars lined the curb outside my complex. Red and blue lights flashed across the stucco walls. Chloe and Grayson stood in my yard, their faces twisted in protest as officers cuffed them. I watched from the sidewalk, arms wrapped tight around myself. Chloe's voice rose above the chaos, shrill and desperate. "She's lying! She's making this up!" But no one was listening. As the officers loaded them into the back of the cruiser, a strange weight lifted from my chest. Relief, yes, but also fear, because if they were willing to corner me like this, what would they do next, once they were free again? My phone buzzed in my pocket with a new voicemail notification. I didn't need to check to know it would be from my mother. The battle wasn't over, it was just beginning. A week passed before I saw my parents again. I had half hoped they'd keep their distance, that Chloe and Grayson's arrest would finally convince them to leave me out of the wreckage. But hope was a fragile thing. One late afternoon, as I watered the succulents on my balcony, I heard the knock. Slow, uncertain, almost apologetic. Through the peephole, I saw them, Mom and Dad, side by side, looking smaller than I remembered. Their posture carried a weight I'd never seen before, like the world had finally pressed hard enough to bend them. I almost didn't open the door. My body remembered the last time, their words echoing like scars. Don't be childish. Be happy for your sister. But something in their faces, creases deeper than before, eyes dulled, made me twist the handle. The door opened only a crack. "What do you want?" My voice was steady, but my heart beat in my ears. Mom stepped forward first. Her face crumpled the moment she saw me, tears spilling before she spoke. "Oh, Bea," she whispered, using the nickname that hadn't passed her lips in years. "I'm so sorry." Dad nodded, the sternness that once anchored him gone. "We were wrong," he said. The words sounded heavy, as if dragged across gravel. "We were wrong to take Chloe's side. We see that now." I stood frozen, the wood of the doorframe pressing into my shoulder. I wanted to believe them. I wanted those words to patch the hole they'd carved. But I'd learned better than to accept bandages over wounds that had never been cleaned. Mom reached for my hand. Her palm was warm, trembling. "We should have defended you. We should have protected you. Instead, we failed. We failed you as parents." A knot twisted in my chest. For years, I'd fantasized about hearing those words, but standing there now, the reality felt different, softer, but also too late. Dad's gaze didn't waver. "We heard about what happened outside your apartment, what they tried to do. There's no excuse. We can't defend them anymore." He swallowed hard, the sound rough. "We've cut them off, Bea, completely. Chloe and Grayson are on their own now. We should have done it the night they hurt you. We didn't, and we're ashamed of that." The silence that followed was thick, punctuated only by Mom's quiet sobs. I let their words wash over me, every sentence pulling at old scars. Part of me wanted to collapse into their arms, to let those apologies stitch me back together. Another part, the part that had built a new life from ashes, stayed rigid, holding the line. "I appreciate that you see it now," I said, my voice low. "But where was this years ago, when I begged you to see me, to hear me? You didn't just fail me once. You abandoned me every time you pretended Chloe's happiness mattered more than my pain." Mom's tears fell harder. "You're right. We can't undo it, but please, please, let us try now. Let us make it right." I shook my head slowly. "I don't want to rebuild something that cost me myself. I've learned to live without you, to breathe without this family dragging me down. I can't go back. I won't." Their faces crumpled with hurt, but I didn't let my resolve falter. Dad's voice cracked. "Are you saying you'll never forgive us?" "I'm saying I need peace," I answered. "And if forgiving you means reopening wounds that almost killed me, then no. Not now. Maybe not ever. My peace matters more." The words hung between us like a final verdict. They didn't argue. Maybe they couldn't. Maybe they knew they had no defense left. After a moment, Mom wiped her cheeks and whispered, "Will you at least unblock our numbers? Just so we know you're alive? Just so we can hear your voice sometimes, even if it's only a hello?" I hesitated. That wall I'd built had kept me safe, but maybe leaving a crack wouldn't destroy it. Slowly I nodded. "I'll unblock you, but don't expect more than that. Don't expect holidays. Don't expect family dinners. Not anymore." Mom nodded, tears glistening like small confessions. Dad's shoulders slumped, resignation settling into his bones. They turned to leave, their footsteps heavy, their shadows long in the fading light. I closed the door behind them and leaned against it, the wood solid against my back. My throat tightened, my chest heavy with a grief I couldn't quite name. They had finally said the words I'd once ached to hear, but instead of healing, the apology left me hollow, reminding me of all the years they hadn't. That night, I unblocked their numbers. My phone buzzed once, then fell silent. A small crack in the wall, but the wall still stood, and it would stand until I decided otherwise. The days after my parents' apology felt oddly weightless, like I was walking through a world that no longer demanded anything of me. Their words had stirred something. Pain, yes, but also release. I didn't have to fight for acknowledgement anymore. They'd admitted their failure, and while that didn't erase the scars, it meant the war was over. I spent a lot of time at the big window in my apartment. From there, Austin stretched out in lights and motion, the skyline a living reminder that the city had gone on while I rebuilt myself. I would sit in the chair I'd dragged close to the glass, coffee in hand, and breathe. No Chloe, no Grayson, no family telling me to be smaller, just me. Alma texted constantly, her usual blend of sarcasm and warmth. Trivia night, don't flake. Coffee's on me if you promise not to bring up your ex's stupid hair again. She was the kind of friend who didn't just pull me back into life, she shoved me in with both hands. Marcus visited the following weekend. He brought over pizza and a six-pack, dropped onto my couch, and said, "I'm proud of you, B. Most people would have caved. You didn't. You're stronger than the whole lot of them." Hearing it from him mattered more than I expected. Family who chose me, not out of obligation, but out of loyalty, out of love. And yet, on quiet nights, I found myself pulling open the drawer where I kept odds and ends. In the corner, still resting like an artifact, was a torn scrap of Chloe and Grayson's wedding invitation. I'd kept it, not out of longing, but as proof. Proof that I'd survived what they thought would destroy me. Proof that I had chosen myself. Sometimes I'd hold it between my fingers and whisper, "Never again." I wasn't naive. Life would throw more storms, more betrayals, more trials I couldn't see yet. But I was different now. The woman who once cried herself to sleep in a hotel bed, believing she'd been replaced, no longer existed. In her place stood someone who had walked through fire and come out tempered. I thought back to my mother's words, "We failed you." I thought back to Chloe's smug defiance in that courtyard, to Grayson's cowardice disguised as calm, to my aunt's accusing voice calling me jealous. All of it swirled in memory like smoke from a fire that had already burned out. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need reconciliation. What I needed was this: the stillness of my apartment, the laughter of friends, the hum of my work pulling me forward. One evening, Alma sprawled across my couch, scrolling her phone while I sketched ideas for a client's mural. She glanced up suddenly and said, "Do you ever think about what you'd say to them if they showed up again?" I paused, pen hovering over paper. The thought didn't make me panic anymore. It didn't even make me angry. "I think I'd tell them I don't hate them," I said slowly. "But I don't need them. There's a difference." Alma smirked, satisfied. "That's growth, babe. That's power." Later, when the apartment fell quiet again, I stood at the window, watching the city pulse below. Neon signs flickered. Traffic buzzed. Laughter drifted from patios. Life moved, always forward. And I realized something simple, something freeing. I wasn't defined by their betrayal anymore. I was defined by the choice I made afterward. The choice to leave, the choice to rebuild, the choice to protect my peace above all else. I'd block them once, unblock them later. Maybe someday I'd answer a call again, maybe not. But the difference now was that the decision belonged to me. Not to guilt, not to manipulation, not to anyone else's definition of family. For the first time in years, I felt whole. As I closed the drawer on that torn invitation and turned off the lights, I carried with me a quiet strength. Not loud, not flashy, but steady. The kind that could withstand whatever came next. I didn't know the future, but I knew this much. I would face it on my own terms. And for me, that was enough.